All right, welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're taking a closer look at Concord Enviro Systems Limited.
Ah,
They're an Indian company and they're really making a name for themselves in the sustainability sector.
yeah.
And guess what? They're about to go public.
Yeah.
So we're going to unpack their IPO and break it down so you know exactly what's going on.
Sounds good.
I've been looking through their IPO filing and some things really caught my eye. Like their order book, it's seriously impressive. And the fact that they've already got some major investors on board
Oh, yeah.
at a really interesting share price too.
Interesting.
So maybe you can give us a little overview. What exactly does Concord Enviro do?
Well, they're really hitting three key areas:
Okay.
water treatment, waste management, and renewable energy solutions.
So they're kind of covering all the bases when it
Yeah.
comes to sustainability.
Exactly. And those are all areas that are seeing huge growth right now.
Makes sense, especially in rapidly developing economies like India.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're in a really good position, I'd say.
So how does all this translate into revenue for them? I mean, it sounds great on paper, but are they actually making money?
Oh, yeah, they're definitely making money. Each of those areas, water treatment, waste management, renewable energy,
Mm-hmm.
they all represent significant revenue streams for Concord Enviro.
Okay, and is it like a steady flow or is it kind of up and down?
Pretty steady, actually. If you look at their financials, you see strong growth across the board. Like, their revenue has been climbing steadily.
That's good.
Yeah, and they've managed to keep their EBITDA margins healthy, too.
EBITDA margins. For those of us who don't speak finance, what does that mean?
Basically, it means they're keeping their operating costs in check. So they're efficiently turning revenue into profit, which is a good thing.
That's definitely what we like to hear. And what about their actual profit, like after taxes, the
Like,
PAT rate?
Yep, exactly. Profit after tax. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, the bottom line.
And theirs been impressive, too. Consistent growth over the past few years.
So they're not just growing, they're doing it in a way that actually makes money.
Exactly, which is
Huh.
what makes investors interested, right?
Right. So it sounds like they're checking a lot of the right boxes.
Yeah, I think so.
But I did notice something in their filing that I wanted to ask you about.
Okay.
Their debt levels. They seem a little high. Should we be concerned about that?
Well, debt's not always a bad thing.
Right.
It can actually be a useful tool for growth. But, you always got to look at it in context.
So how do we know if their debt is manageable or if it's something to be worried about?
Well, one way to assess that is to look at their debt-to-equity ratio.
Okay, and what is that exactly?
It basically tells you how much debt they're using to finance their assets compared to how much is coming from shareholder equity.
Okay, so it gives you a sense of how much they're relying on borrowed money versus their own funds.
Right. Ideally, you want to see that ratio within a reasonable range. And from what I've seen, Concord Enviro, they seem to be managing their debt pretty well. But you should always do your own research, of course.
Of course. Always good to dig into the details and compare their debt levels to other companies in the same industry.
Definitely. Get a sense of the benchmarks.
All right, so we've got a company operating in a sector with huge potential. They're showing strong financials, and their debt seems to be under control. What else should we look at when we're trying to figure out their future prospects?
I'd say their order book is a key indicator.
Okay. And remind me what that is again?
Basically, it's like a snapshot of their future revenue. It's a list of all the confirmed projects they're lined up to work on.
Okay, so a big order book means good things are coming down the pipeline.
Exactly. And Concord Enviro's order book, it's not just big, it's also really diverse.
Oh, in what way?
Well, they've got orders from all sorts of sectors: municipal governments, private industries.
So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Which helps to create those nice, stable revenue streams.
That makes sense. But what about the timelines for those projects? I mean, how quickly can they actually turn those orders into revenue?
That's a great question. Execution timelines are definitely important. They can tell you a lot about how efficient a company is.
Right, because you could have a huge order book, but if it takes forever to actually complete the projects, then it doesn't really matter, does it?
Right. So from what I've seen, it looks like Concord Enviro has a pretty good track record of delivering projects on time, which is definitely a good sign.
So they've got the projects and they're getting them done. Now let's talk about the main event,
All right.
the IPO. What are the key details?
Well, they've priced their shares at 701 rupees.
Okay.
It's a price that suggests they're aiming for a pretty substantial valuation right out of the gate.
That's a bold move. What does that pricing tell us about how the market feels about Concord Enviro?
I'd say it indicates that the market believes in their growth potential, and that price point has definitely attracted some big-name investors.
Yeah, I saw that. especially domestic mutual funds.
Right.
I was looking at that list of anchor investors, and some big names jumped out. ICICI, Prudential, Kotak, Banthan.
Yeah, those are some serious players.
They are. So what does that level of institutional backing tell you?
Well, those institutions, they're known for doing their homework, their due diligence. They really focus on long-term value. So the fact that they're investing in Concord Enviro's IPO, it speaks volumes. It shows they have confidence in the company's future.
And it sounds like there's a lot of confidence coming from within India itself.
Yeah, for sure. A large portion of the anchor allocation went to domestic mutual funds. That's a really positive sign.
All right, so we've got a company with a solid foundation, a bright future, and some serious investors backing them up.
Yeah.
So what's next? What are their growth plans looking like?
They've got some ambitious expansion plans, both domestically and internationally. They want to solidify their position as a leader in sustainable solutions. And they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're investing heavily in research and development to stay ahead of the curve.
And it seems like that focus on sustainable technologies is a big part of their strategy.
It is, yeah.
How does that fit with the bigger picture, the broader industry trends?
Well, investors are getting more and more interested in companies that are not just profitable, but also environmentally responsible.
Right. It's not just about the bottom line anymore.
Exactly. And Concord Enviro is tapping into this growing market of investors who want their money to make a positive impact.
I love that. Okay, so everything's looking rosy so far, but let's be realistic for a second. No investment is without risk.
True.
What are some of the potential challenges that Concord Enviro might face?
Well, one of the biggest risks for any company in this sector is regulatory compliance.
Yeah.
The environmental sector is heavily regulated, and for good reason, too.
Right. Got to protect the environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So any changes or delays in those regulations, that could have a big impact on Concord Enviro's operations.
So they need to be adaptable, I guess,
Definitely.
and probably have a good legal team on their side
Oh, yeah, for sure. Always helpful.
to navigate all those potential hurdles.
Absolutely.
So regulatory compliance, that's one risk.
Right.
What other risks should we be thinking about?
Well, project delays are always a possibility in this industry.
That's true.
I mean, these large-scale infrastructure projects, they're complex.
Yeah.
There's always a chance of unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah. You never know what's going to pop up.
Right. And those delays could potentially impact their revenue projections.
Okay. So that's something to keep in mind.
Definitely. And then there's the whole issue of raw material costs.
Ah, yeah. That's a big one for a lot of industries these days.
It is. It's a factor that affects pretty much everyone.
Especially when prices are so volatile.
Exactly. I mean, those fluctuating material prices could really squeeze their profit margins.
If they're not careful.
If they're not careful, exactly.
It sounds like they've got a lot to juggle.
They do. It's a complex business, for sure.
It is.
But, you know,
Yeah.
their track record suggests they're pretty good at managing these kinds of challenges.
Okay, that's reassuring.
Yeah. And I think it's helpful to zoom in on those three key business areas that we talked about before.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Starting with water treatment.
All right, water treatment. A pretty crucial need, I'd say.
Absolutely, especially in India.
Yeah, where access to clean water is still a major challenge for a lot of people.
It is a major challenge, and it's essential for everything.
Right.
Public health, sanitation, industrial growth.
It all comes back to water.
It does. So what's Concord Enviro doing in this space?
Yeah, what are they actually doing to address this?
Well, they're designing, building, and operating water treatment plants.
Okay.
These plants use some pretty advanced technologies to remove contaminants from all kinds of water sources.
Oh, wow.
So they're making that water safe for drinking, agriculture, industrial use.
So they're not just talking about sustainability, they're actually putting it into practice.
Exactly. They're coming up with real, tangible solutions.
I like it. Okay, so that's water treatment.
Right.
What about waste management? How does that fit into their business model?
Well, waste management is another critical area where Concord Enviro is making a difference. You know, the whole problem of waste disposal, it's growing.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
It is. So they're developing innovative solutions for collecting, treating, and recycling waste.
So instead of just dumping everything in landfills,
Exactly.
they're finding ways to make it useful.
Exactly. They're employing technologies like composting,
Okay.
anaerobic digestion, waste-to-energy plants
Wow.
to convert waste into valuable resources.
Like what kind of resources?
Compost, biogas, even electricity.
So they're turning trash into treasure.
Pretty much. It's a win-win for the environment and their bottom line.
That's fantastic.
Okay.
Okay, so we've covered water treatment, waste management.
Right.
Now let's talk about the third piece of the puzzle,
Mhm.
renewable energy.
Right.
What's their approach in that area?
They're heavily invested in solar and wind energy projects.
Oh,
They're developing and operating solar power plants, wind farms, all across India.
so they're actively contributing to India's shift to a cleaner energy future.
They are.
I like that they're not just treating the symptoms.
Right.
They're addressing the root causes by promoting these clean energy alternatives.
Exactly. And it aligns perfectly with the growing global demand for sustainable solutions.
It does. It really does.
Okay.
Okay, so we've seen how Concord Enviro is making waves in water treatment, waste management, and renewable energy.
Yep.
Now let's tie back to their financials.
Okay.
We talked about their strong revenue growth before
Yeah.
and their healthy EBITDA margins.
Mm-hmm.
But what's actually driving those numbers? What should we be paying attention to?
Well, one key driver is their operational efficiency.
Okay.
They've been able to keep their operating costs low while maintaining a high level of output.
So they're doing more with less.
Basically, yeah. And that's reflected in their EBITDA margin,
Right.
which is a good indicator of a company's ability to generate profit from their core operations.
So that's something investors look at closely.
They do.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that their profit after tax, the PAT,
Right.
has also been on an upward trajectory.
Yeah.
What does that tell us about their overall financial health?
Well, it shows that they're successfully converting revenue into actual profit, which is a very positive sign for investors.
Right, because growth is great, but profitable growth is even better.
Exactly. It shows that they're not just expanding, they're doing it in a way that makes financial sense.
Now let's go back to that impressive order book of theirs for a second.
Okay.
Can you give us some specific examples of the projects that they have lined up? What are some of the highlights?
Sure. So, for example, they've secured some major contracts for water treatment plants in several rapidly growing cities across India, which is essential, for meeting that increasing demand for clean water in those urban areas.
Right, makes sense.
On the waste management front, they're working on some large-scale waste-to-energy plants
Oh, cool.
that will process municipal waste and generate electricity.
Wow, so they're really tackling these challenges head on.
They are. These are real game changers.
Yeah, not just for Concord Enviro, but for the communities they're serving.
Exactly. And what about renewable energy?
Yeah, any notable developments in that area?
Well, they've secured contracts for several large-scale solar power plants,
Okay.
again, across India, contributing to the country's renewable energy goals.
It's amazing how they're weaving sustainability into every aspect of their operations.
It is.
It's clear that they're committed to making a real impact.
And their IPO is strategically designed to fuel these ambitious plans.
Right, we talked about their IPO details, the share price, the anchor investors. But how are they actually planning to use the proceeds from this IPO? What are they going to do with all that cash?
Well, they're going to use it to fuel their growth, of course.
Okay.
They plan to invest in new projects,
Mm-hmm.
expand their existing facilities, enhance their research and development capabilities.
So they're not just sitting back and relaxing.
Right.
They're using this opportunity to really take things to the next level.
That's right. Reinvesting in growth is a sign of a company that's committed to long-term success.
But we can't forget about those risks that we talked about before.
Yeah, true.
Regulatory compliance, project delays, those volatile raw material costs.
They're all very real challenges.
They are. So let's dig into those a little deeper,
Okay.
starting with regulatory compliance.
Okay.
I mean, that seems like a particularly big concern for companies in the environmental sector.
It is.
The landscape is constantly changing.
Constantly, yeah, with new regulations and permitting requirements popping up all the time.
So they need a strong legal and compliance team to keep up with all of that.
Absolutely, they need to be on top of it.
And what about those potential project delays? How big of a risk are those, and how can they try to mitigate them?
Well, project delays are always a headache.
Yeah, especially with these large infrastructure projects.
Exactly. And they can be caused by all sorts of things.
Like what?
Permitting issues, unexpected technical challenges, sometimes even geopolitical events.
Oh, wow, you really never know.
So how can they minimize that risk?
Yeah, how can they keep things on track?
Well, thorough planning and risk assessment are crucial. They need to have robust project management systems in place,
Okay.
contingency plans for potential setbacks.
Makes sense. Always good to have a backup plan.
Exactly. And, building strong relationships with regulatory bodies and local communities,
Okay.
that can also help to expedite the approval process.
Right, smooth things over.
Yeah, make things a little easier.
And what about the volatility of raw material prices?
Right.
How can they manage that risk?
Yeah, especially in an industry that relies so heavily on materials like steel and cement.
And all those specialized components.
Exactly. It's tough.
It is.
It's a delicate balancing act.
So what can they do?
Well, they can explore strategies like locking in prices through long-term contracts with suppliers.
Okay.
But even that doesn't eliminate the risk completely.
Right, because prices can still fluctuate.
So they need to be adaptable, proactive
Mm-hmm.
in managing those price fluctuations.
But maybe looking into hedging strategies or exploring alternative materials.
Exactly. Those could be part of their risk mitigation plan.
It sounds like they need to be strategic and agile to navigate all the uncertainties of the market.
They do. No business is entirely immune to risk.
That's true.
But Concord Enviro seems to be taking the right steps to identify and mitigate those potential challenges.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, and it's encouraging to see that they're not just focused on growth for growth's sake.
Right.
They're also putting measures in place to ensure that their growth is sustainable and responsible.
That's got to be appealing to investors.
It is precisely that commitment to sustainable practices is a big part of what makes them so attractive.
Right, because investors are increasingly looking for opportunities that align with their values.
Exactly. And Concord Enviro's focus on environmental and social responsibility really resonates with that trend.
So it's not just about making money, it's about making a positive impact.
Exactly. And that brings us back to their IPO.
Okay.
This public offering, it's a unique opportunity for investors to not only participate in a potentially lucrative venture, but also to support a company that's actively working towards a more sustainable future.
It's a chance to put your money where your mouth is.
It is. And that's a powerful proposition.
It is. But as with any investment,
Right?
it's important to approach it with a balanced perspective.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
Their business model, their financials, their growth plans, and those potential risks they face.
It's all about understanding both the potential rewards and the inherent risks.
Right, and that's what we've tried to do here today,
Hopefully.
to give you the information you need to make an informed decision.
Exactly.
So we explored their 3 key business areas.
Right. Water treatment, waste management, renewable energy.
And we saw how they're generating revenue and creating value in each of those sectors.
We did, and we delved into their financials, looking at their revenue growth, EBITDA margins, PAT, and how they're managing their debt.
We analyzed their order book, highlighting its impressive size, its diversification, and what it means for their future revenue.
And of course, we broke down the key details of their IPO.
The issue size, pricing, the interest from major investors.
And how they plan to use the proceeds to fuel their growth.
Right, and we didn't shy away from those potential risks, regulatory compliance, potential project delays, those volatile raw material costs.
They're all important factors to consider.
They are. But despite those challenges, Concord Enviro seems to be in a pretty good position.
I think so.
They've got a strong track record, an innovative approach to sustainability, ambitious growth plans, and significant investor confidence.
All pointing towards a bright future.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Concord Enviro Systems, there's one final thought I'd like to leave you with. Think about this. We've been talking about how Concord Enviro is making a difference in India. But could their impact go even further? Could they become like a model for sustainable development on a global scale?
That's a really interesting question.
It is, isn't it?
Like, imagine if their approach to water treatment, waste management, renewable energy could be replicated in other countries that are facing similar challenges.
That would be pretty amazing.
It would be inspiring for sure.
It would. So let's bring it back to the IPO for a second. We've talked about those big institutional investors.
Right.
But what about everyday investors like you and me?
Yeah.
Is this an opportunity worth considering?
Well, Concord Enviro has set aside a portion of the IPO specifically for retail investors.
Oh, okay.
So that means you and I, we have a chance to get in on the action.
But I imagine there are some things we should probably look into first.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Before we just jump in.
As with any investment, it's crucial to do your homework.
Right. Don't just get caught up in the excitement.
Exactly. Take a look at the Red Herring Prospectus.
Okay.
That's where you'll find all the details about the company, their financials, the risks involved, everything.
So the prospectus is kind of like our guide.
Exactly. It's your roadmap to understanding this investment.
It sounds like Concord Enviro is being pretty transparent.
They're providing investors with the information they need to make informed decisions.
Which is what we want.
Absolutely. And speaking of informed decisions,
Yeah.
remember that investing in an IPO is a little different
Oh, how so?
than investing in a company that's already publicly traded.
Right, because there's no track record to look at.
Exactly. With an IPO, you don't have that historical stock performance to analyze.
So it's more about assessing their potential.
Right. Based on their current performance, their plans for the future.
And how the market is doing overall.
Exactly. You're essentially betting on their ability to execute their strategy.
And deliver on those promises.
It all comes down to that.
And that's where all those factors we talked about come in.
Right.
Their business model, their financials, their order book.
Their leadership team, the regulatory landscape.
And those potential risks.
Yeah, forget about those.
It's a lot to consider.
It is, but that's what makes investing so interesting.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
It's about weighing those potential rewards against the risks.
And making a judgment call.
Based on the best information you have available.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Concord Enviro Systems, what are the key takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
Well, I think the main thing is that Concord Enviro is a company that's at the forefront of this global movement towards sustainable solutions.
Right? They're not just talking about it.
They're doing it.
They're taking action.
They're tackling some of the world's most pressing challenges.
Clean water, responsible waste management.
The transition to renewable energy.
And they're doing it in a way that's innovative and profitable.
Exactly. They've shown a strong track record of growth.
And they've built a solid financial foundation.
And they've attracted some serious interest from investors.
So their IPO, it's an opportunity to be part of something bigger.
It is.
To invest in a company that's not just focused on the bottom line,
Right.
but also on making a positive impact.
It's a chance to align your investments with your values.
I like that. But of course, as with any investment, it's essential to do your own due diligence.
Absolutely.
Carefully consider those risks.
And make sure this investment aligns with your own financial goals.
This deep dive has given you a good overview of Concord Enviro Systems Limited.
And their IPO.
But the Red Herring Prospectus,
Right.
that's where you'll find all the details.
It'll give you a deeper understanding of the company and their plans.
So take the time to explore it, weigh those pros and cons, and then make the decision that's right for you.
Investing is a journey, not a destination.
I like that.
It's all about making those informed decisions.
That align with your own circumstances and aspirations.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll look back and say, remember Concord Enviro?
Yeah.
That was just the beginning of a global shift towards a more sustainable future.
That's a great thought to end on.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Concord Enviro Systems.
It was fun.
It was. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.